You're still messed up from that, my sister laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was casual, like she was asking if I still preferred almond milk. We were sitting around my mom's dining table in Dallas. Pot roast, green beans, the same heavy plates she'd had since 2004. My sister Valerie had invited a couple of her friends over, one of them a mortgage broker she was trying to impress. Apparently my nervous system was tonight's entertainment. I kept my fork in my hand and didn't look up. Mom nodded like Valerie had just made a reasonable observation. She's just being dramatic. There it was. 2 votes against me before I even opened my mouth. For context, I'm a lieutenant colonel select in the U.S. Army, combat engineer. 3 deployments. Bronze Star with a V device. I've led route clearance teams in places most people can't pronounce. But sure, dramatic. Valerie took a sip of wine and leaned back in her chair. I mean, it's been 2 years since Syria. At some point, you move on. Across the table, her friend gave me that tight smile people use when they don't know if they're allowed to laugh. I gave her nothing back. It wasn't even what Valerie said. It was how she said it. Like PTSD was a leftover habit I hadn't bothered to break. I set my fork down carefully. The clink against the plate sounded louder than it should have. That happens when your brain is always scanning for threats. Every sound gets a promotion. Valerie noticed. See, she said, gesturing toward me. Still jumpy. Mom sighed. You can't live like that forever, Cass. That's the thing. I don't want to live like that. Nobody signs up for hypervigilance as a lifestyle choice. I kept my voice steady. It's not about wanting to. Valerie waved a hand. You weren't even infantry. What exactly are you traumatized from? There it was. The resume comparison. For the record, combat engineers don't sit around building birdhouses. We clear roads for convoys. We look for things buried in dirt that explode. We go first so other units don't get hit. But explaining that at my mom's dining table wasn't going to help. Valerie leaned forward. If loud noises still mess you up, how are you leading soldiers? That one landed. Because now we weren't talking about my sleep. We were talking about my command. One of her friends raised her eyebrows. Not in judgment, just curiosity. That casual curiosity people have when they smell instability. I felt my jaw tighten. Not anger, control. The 4th of July had been rough this year. Fireworks in Texas don't mess around. I'd been at Valerie's backyard party when the first one went off. My body reacted before my brain did. I'd crouched instinctively looking for cover. It lasted maybe 3 seconds. Valerie had laughed then too. You'd think she was still overseas. Everyone chuckled. I told myself it was fine. It was a reflex. People don't understand reflex. But this was different. This was deliberate. Mom folded her napkin. We're just worried, that's all. Worried. About what? That I'd embarrass them. That I'd clear my throat too aggressively at Thanksgiving. Valerie smiled, the kind she uses in listing photos. I'm just saying, if you're going to stay in the Army long term, you can't be this sensitive. Sensitive. I've walked into blast zones to pull soldiers out. I've signed casualty reports at 0300. I've called parents who will never get their son back. But sure, sensitive. The mortgage broker finally spoke. So are you still in therapy? There it was. Now it was open season. Yes, I said. Valerie let out a short laugh. See? That's what I'm talking about. Mom added therapy's fine for a while. But you can't make it your identity. I stared at the center of the table. There was a scratch in the wood shaped like a lightning bolt. I focused on that instead of the heat in my chest. Therapy isn't an identity. It's maintenance. Like physical therapy after a broken leg. Nobody tells you to stop rehabbing halfway because it makes them uncomfortable. Valerie tilted her head. You know what this sounds like, drama. That word hung there. Drama, not trauma. Drama. The room went quiet in that uncomfortable way where people pretend they're chewing. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't cruel in tone. That would have been easier. She sounded amused. You're still messed up from that, she repeated softer this time, like she was explaining something obvious. Mom nodded again. She's just being dramatic. I looked up at both of them. Valerie had perfect hair, perfect posture, a real estate award sitting on the sideboard behind her. Mom looked tired but aligned. United front. Neither of them had ever asked what actually happened that day in Syria. Not once. No questions about the convoy. No questions about the blast. Just how long I planned on still dealing with it. Across the table, Valerie's friend cleared her throat. Well, I'm sure it was intense. Valerie shrugged. Sure. But lots of people go through stuff. You don't see them making it their whole personality. There it was again. Personality. Like I'd chosen this for branding. I pushed my chair back slowly. The legs scraped against the hardwood. Valerie looked up. Oh, come on. Don't be like that. Mom's voice tightened. Cass. I grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair. We're just talking, Valerie said. You don't have to get all offended. Offended. I paused at the end of the table and finally met her eyes. You ever ask what happened? I asked. She blinked. What? In Syria. Did you ever ask? She hesitated just long enough to answer the question without speaking. That's different, she said. No, I replied. It's not. Mom shook her head. You're overreacting. Maybe. Or maybe I was done explaining myself to people who never asked in the first place. I walked toward the front door. Nobody stood up. Nobody followed. Behind me, Valerie's voice carried one last time light and dismissive. You can't handle real life if you can't handle this. I stepped outside into the humid Texas night. Fireflies blinked in the yard like nothing was wrong. A car drove past. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked. My hands were steady as I unlocked my rental car. But steady doesn't mean calm. And that night driving back to my hotel, I realized something I probably should have figured out years ago. This wasn't just about fireworks. It wasn't even about therapy. It was about respect. And in that house, I didn't have it. I didn't turn on the radio as I pulled out of my mom's driveway. The silence felt cleaner. Dallas traffic at night is predictable. Wide roads, long lights, people in oversized trucks who think turn signals are optional. I drove with both hands on the wheel. Posture, straight eyes scanning. Not because I was upset, because that's just how I drive now. Valerie's words kept replaying anyway. Drama. Sensitive. Still messed up. This didn't start tonight. It didn't even start in Syria. It started in a house where feelings were treated like bad manners. Growing up, we weren't allowed to cry over small things. Or medium things. Or sometimes even big things. My dad had been in the Texas Army National Guard when he was younger. Not combat. Logistics. But he carried himself like discipline was a personality trait. When something went wrong, his answer was always the same. Shake it off. Valerie was good at that. She could shut things down fast. If she got hurt, she turned it into sarcasm. If she got nervous, she talked louder. By high school, she had it perfected. Student council, cheer captain, the kind of kid teachers described as driven. I was different. I liked structure, rules, clear expectations. I didn't need to be the loudest person in the room. I just wanted things to make sense. When I was 14, I cried after losing a basketball game in the district finals. Not hysterical, just frustrated. I'd missed 2 free throws in the last minute. Valerie pulled me aside in the parking lot. Stop, she said. You look weak. Weak. That word stuck early. Mom wasn't cruel. She just believed in resilience the way some people believe in vitamins. If you kept moving, you'd be fine. If you talked about it too much, you were feeding it. Valerie absorbed that philosophy and upgraded it. By her mid-20s, she had built an entire personality around being unshakable. She worked in real estate, which is basically competitive smiling. Open houses, contracts, negotiations. She thrived in it. A few years back, she lost a major deal. A 7-figure property that fell through at the last minute. I remember because she called me that night. Her voice was tight, controlled. She said she was fine at least 4 times in the first 2 minutes. I just need to push through, she said. I don't have time to spiral. Spiral. She never did admit that it rattled her. But I heard it in her breathing. I suggested she talk to someone. Just once. She laughed it off. I'm not you, she said. I don't need therapy to function. At the time, it didn't register as a shot. Now it does. Valerie doesn't hate trauma. She hates vulnerability, especially public vulnerability. That's why fireworks embarrassed her more than they scared me. The first time it happened was at her 4th of July party last year. Backyard full of clients and neighbors. String lights overhead. Country music playing too loud. The first firework went up without warning. The pop echoed sharper than I expected. My body reacted before my brain could negotiate with it. I dropped low, one knee bent, scanning. It lasted maybe 2 seconds. When I stood up, Valerie was staring at me. Not worried, amused. "You good?" she asked, but the tone said something else. A couple people laughed lightly. "Not mean, just awkward." "Relax," she added. "You're in Texas, not a war zone." That one got a bigger laugh. I brushed it off. I even smiled. Because explaining blast overpressure and muscle memory to people holding red Solo cups isn't efficient. But I saw it. That flicker in her face. That mix of embarrassment and superiority. It wasn't fear she felt. It was discomfort. And Valerie handles discomfort by pushing it away from herself. Fast forward to tonight's dinner and it made sense. If my trauma stays visible, it challenges her worldview. It suggests that strength and struggle can exist in the same body, that you can lead soldiers and still need therapy. That idea doesn't fit into her model. When I commissioned through ROTC at 22, she'd joked that I just wanted structure because I couldn't handle real life. She was already selling houses by then, making more money than I was as a second lieutenant. "You're hiding in the Army," she told me once. "Out here, there's no safety net." I didn't argue. I was too busy learning how to manage a platoon. Over the years, as my deployments stacked up, she softened publicly. She'd post patriotic captions on social media. "Proud of my sister serving overseas." Little flag emoji energy. But in private, it was different. "How long are you going to keep doing this?" she asked after my second deployment. "As long as I'm needed." She rolled her eyes. "That's not what I mean." She meant, how long was I going to choose a life that required sacrifice? A life that came with consequences. When I got the Bronze Star with a V device after Syria, she congratulated me, took a picture next to me in uniform, posted it, but she never asked about the mission. Not once. The convoy, the blast, the vehicle on fire, the soldier we couldn't save. She prefers outcomes to process. Awards make sense, nightmares don't. That's the root of it. Valerie understands achievement. She does not understand cost. And if she doesn't understand it, she reduces it. Drama. I stopped at a red light near downtown and watched a couple cross the street holding hands. Normal Tuesday night energy. No one crouching at loud noises. No one scanning rooftops. It would be easier if Valerie were just cruel. If she were obviously toxic. But she's not. She don't scream. She doesn't sabotage. She minimizes. And minimization is quiet enough to pass for love if you squint. By the time I pulled into the hotel parking lot, my jaw had unclenched. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. Tonight wasn't about fireworks. It wasn't about therapy. It was about a pattern that started long before I ever put on a uniform. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to explain myself inside it. The first thing I remember about that morning in Syria was the wind. Not dramatic wind, just steady dry air pushing dust across the road while we staged outside the wire. It was late spring 2021. I was a major, then company executive officer attached to a route clearance package. Our job was simple on paper: move ahead of a supply convoy, clear the route, identify and neutralize threats before the rest of the formation rolled through. Simple doesn't mean safe. We rolled out in MRAPs just after sunrise. The sun wasn't fully up, but the sky had that pale gray look that tells you heat is coming. I was in the second vehicle headset on, scanning through the windshield as our lead truck moved slowly, methodically. Route clearance is a patience game. You look for disturbed soil wires, trash piles that don't belong. You notice what's different from yesterday. We had engineers on dismount sweeping ahead with detectors. Everyone moved like they'd done it 100 times. Because we had. The blast came from the left side of the lead vehicle. It wasn't cinematic. No slow motion. Just a violent crack and a shockwave that hit my chest before my brain processed the sound. The lead MRAP lifted, tilted, and slammed back down. My headset filled with overlapping voices. Contact left small arms. Dust swallowed the front half of the convoy. Through it, I could see muzzle flashes from a low building about 200 meters out. Training kicks in fast. Establish security. Suppress that position. My driver accelerated forward just enough to close distance without overrunning the lead vehicle. I remember thinking how controlled my voice sounded. Calm, even, like I was giving directions in a motor pool. Inside the lead, MR, Pea smoke started pushing out through the seams. One of our specialists, Gonzalez, was halfway out the rear hatch shouting that Turner was still inside. Turner had been sitting behind the blast point. The small arms fire tapered off once our gunners returned fire. Not gone, but less accurate. Whoever had triggered the device wasn't looking for a prolonged fight. Check for secondary, I ordered. IEDs often come in pairs. The first draws you in. The second finishes the job. One of our engineers started sweeping the immediate area detector, moving slowly over dirt that looked untouched but never is. Gonzalez climbed back toward the open hatch. Smoke thickened. Ma'am, he's not moving. I don't remember deciding to move. I just moved. I left my vehicle and closed the distance to the lead truck, keeping low. My boots hit gravel and dirt, each step deliberate. The engineer shouted that the area wasn't clear yet. I heard him. I kept moving. Inside the MRAP, the air was hot and metallic. Turner was slumped forward, harness twisted. Blood pooled dark against the floorboard. He was breathing but shallow. I cut the harness and pulled. Dead weight is heavier than you think. He wasn't a big guy, but gear adds pounds fast. My gloves slipped once. I adjusted, braced my boots against the doorframe and dragged him out. Outside, Gonzalez grabbed his shoulders. Together we moved him toward cover behind the third vehicle. Medic. The medic was already there, kneeling, hands steady. I stepped back long enough for him to work. Secondary clear, the engineer yelled. Only then did I feel my pulse in my throat. Another soldier, Rodriguez, had taken shrapnel to the neck. He was conscious but fading. We applied pressure, loaded both onto the medevac bird when it came in. Turner made it. Rodriguez didn't. I was the one who signed the casualty report later that night. Paperwork after combat feels detached. You sit under fluorescent lights typing facts about someone who 12 hours earlier was arguing about protein bars. Cause of death. Time of incident. Coordinates. I called Rodriguez's parents 2 days later from a secure line. His mother answered. Her voice was hopeful at first. By the end of the call, it wasn't. That part never shows up in highlight reels. Weeks after the incident, my battalion commander called me into his office. You re-entered the blast area before secondary was confirmed clear, he said. Yes, sir. You understand why that's an issue. Yes, sir. He leaned back. You also understand why I'm recommending you for a Bronze Star with V. I nodded once. The award citation described extraordinary heroism under enemy fire. It mentioned decisive leadership and disregard for personal safety. It did not mention the way my hands shook later that night when I finally sat down alone. It did not mention the smell of burned wiring that lingered in my gear for days. It definitely did not mention the look on Gonzalez's face when Rodriguez's pulse stopped. Back home, when the medal was presented, Valerie stood next to me for a picture. She wore a red dress and told me to stand up straighter. Smile, she whispered. This is huge. I smiled. She posted it with a caption about bravery and sacrifice. Dozens of likes. Comment after comment about how proud she must be. She never asked what it cost. That mission didn't break me. It rewired me. After that day, my brain cataloged exits automatically. I noticed parked cars with too much weight in the trunk. I reacted to sudden noise before identifying it. Hypervigilance isn't drama. It's pattern recognition that never powers down. When Valerie laughs at fireworks, she's laughing at muscle memory, at survival. The footage from that day existed long before any documentary called. One of the soldiers had a helmet camera running. It captured the blast, the smoke, the pull from the vehicle. It went into official channels, cleared for internal review when the award was processed. I never watched it. I didn't need to. I carry it fine without video. Back in my hotel room in Dallas, staring at the ceiling hours after dinner, I could see the inside of that MRAP clearer than my mom's dining room. Valerie thinks trauma means you couldn't handle something. What she doesn't understand is that sometimes trauma means you handled it anyway. I kept the hotel curtains open that night because closed spaces feel smaller when your brain won't power down. By the time I flew back to Colorado 2 days later, Dallas already felt like a separate life. Fort Carson sits at the edge of open sky and mountains, the kind of place where the horizon makes you breathe deeper whether you want to or not. Work doesn't slow down because you're thinking about dinner conversations. As a field-grade officer, my days are full. Training schedules, maintenance briefs, counseling sessions, risk assessments. Soldiers don't care if you slept well. They care if you're consistent. Consistency I can do. Sleep is negotiable. The nightmares didn't start immediately after Syria. They came in waves. First few weeks, nothing. Then one night, I was back inside the MRAP smoke filling the cab. Turner reaching for me. Rodriguez fading in my peripheral vision. I woke up already sitting upright, heart-hammering hand, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. I live alone. No one sees that part. During the day, I function. I PT with the unit. I lead meetings. I make decisions that affect real people. Nobody in my battalion has ever questioned whether I can do my job. But my body has opinions. Car backfires in a parking lot. My shoulders tense before I process it's a Honda Civic, not an ambush. Construction crew drops a steel beam near post housing. My brain runs through cover options automatically. It's not fear. It's reflex. Behavioral health on base isn't a secret dungeon. It's an office building with fluorescent lights and government chairs. I scheduled my first appointment myself. The captain at the front desk didn't blink when I gave my name and rank. Combat stress isn't rare here. The psychologist assigned to me was a civilian contractor prior service. She didn't treat me like I was fragile. She asked specific questions. Are you avoiding reminders? No. Hypervigilance? Yes. Sleep disruption? Yes. Any impact on command decisions? No. That last one matters. In the Army, PTSD doesn't automatically end your career. What matters is whether you can perform. I could. I still can. We worked on grounding techniques, breathing, sleep hygiene, cognitive reframing. It wasn't dramatic. It was structured, measured, like rehab for an injury you can't x-ray. I documented everything properly. I informed my rater that I was utilizing behavioral health resources. No surprises, no hiding. My OER that year was strong. Demonstrates exceptional composure under pressure. That line made me laugh quietly when I read it. Composure and insomnia can coexist. The 4th of July that year in Colorado wasn't bad. Post-restricted fireworks, so it was mostly controlled displays in the distance. I watched from my balcony and felt my pulse rise once or twice, then settle. Texas is different. Valerie's backyard doesn't believe in moderation. When that first mortar-style firework went up at her party last summer, my body reacted the way it was trained to react. Down, scan, assess. It took 2 seconds, maybe 3. Valerie clapped slowly. We're celebrating, not invading. Everyone laughed. I stood up, brushed off my jeans, and forced a smile. I even made a joke about reflexes. Inside, I felt heat behind my ribs. Not embarrassment, exposure. Later that night, Mom pulled me aside near the kitchen sink. You're fine, right? She asked. I'm fine. You just can't keep reacting like that. People don't understand. That sentence stuck. People don't understand. It wasn't concern for me. It was concern for perception. Back in Colorado, none of this followed me to work. Soldiers don't judge you for flinching at fireworks. Half of them do it too. What they judge you for is inconsistency, and I'm not inconsistent. If anything, I over-prepare. I review convoy plans twice. I triple-check range safety briefs. I memorize evacuation routes in hotels without thinking about it. Some call that hypervigilance. I call it experience. The promotion board for lieutenant colonel met earlier this year. Files reviewed, records scrutinized, awards listed, education verified. No one from that board asked about fireworks in Texas. They looked at performance. When I got the notification that I'd been selected for promotion pending sequence number, I didn't celebrate loudly. I sat in my office door closed and let out a slow breath. Years of work, multiple deployments, hard evaluations. Valerie doesn't know that yet. She thinks leadership is measured by how comfortable you look at dinner. One afternoon after a long training meeting, I ran into Sergeant First Class Marcus Hill near the motor pool. He'd been in my route clearance team in Syria before retiring medically. Lost 2 fingers on his left hand from a separate blast. He noticed the circles under my eyes. You sleeping? He asked. Working on it. He nodded once. You're not broken. I know. Doesn't mean it feels normal. That's the thing. PTSD isn't cinematic. It's inconvenient. It's subtle. It's scanning rooms and choosing seats with your back to walls. It's functioning anyway. Valerie sees therapy and hears weakness. My battalion sees readiness. 2 different lenses. When I think back to that dinner table in Dallas, I don't feel rage. I feel misalignment. They think trauma equals incapacity. I know trauma can sit quietly next to competence. The Army doesn't hand out bronze stars for drama. It hands them out for decisions made under pressure. And every morning I still put on the uniform and make decisions that matter. If that's weakness, it's doing a pretty solid job. I left Dallas that weekend without answering Valerie's last text. "You're being too sensitive." That's the phrase people use when they don't want to examine their own behavior. Back in Colorado, I threw myself into work, not as avoidance, just because it was there. Field problem prep, safety brief revisions, equipment accountability. The Army runs on paperwork and people who show up early. But the dinner replayed differently now. It wasn't just that Valerie laughed. It was who was in the room. 2 of her realtor friends, a mortgage broker, one of Mom's church friends, people who didn't know me beyond Cass in uniform. And now in their heads, I was the officer who couldn't handle loud noises. That part bothered me more than the insult. Valerie doesn't understand how reputation works in my world. Stability isn't optional in command. If even one whisper suggests you're not solid, it sticks. It doesn't have to be true. It just has to circulate. A week after I got back, Mom called. "I think you took that dinner too personally," she said. "I don't think I did." She didn't mean anything by it. She questioned whether I should be leading soldiers. Mom paused. She was joking. About my job. Another pause. "Well, maybe you could have handled it lighter." There it was again. Manage the optics, smooth the surface. No one asked why the comment was made, only why I reacted to it. 2 days later, Valerie texted, "So you're really just not going to talk to me?" I stared at the message in my office between meetings. No apology, no acknowledgement, just irritation. I didn't respond. She sent another one that night. "I'm just trying to help you. If you're going to stay in the Army long term, you need thicker skin." Thicker skin. I've stood inside a blast radius and dragged a soldier out of a burning vehicle. I've signed condolence letters. I've testified in an investigation after contact. But apparently what I needed was thicker skin for Texas dinner parties. The final message came an hour later. People were asking if you're okay to be in charge. I defended you. I read that twice. People were asking. That's how it spreads. Casual concern framed as care. It's not malicious. It's worse. It's socially acceptable doubt. I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. Then I locked my phone and went back to my calendar. That weekend I ran into Marcus at a small veteran support meeting off post. He volunteers there. I show up when my schedule allows. We were stacking folding chairs when he looked at me sideways. "You've got that face," he said. "What face?" "The one where you're calculating something." I leaned against the wall. "My sister told people she's not sure I should be leading." He let out a slow breath, based on fireworks, therapy, reflex. He nodded once. "That's ignorance, not intel." "Doesn't matter. It's out there now." Marcus shrugged. "You can't control what civilians think leadership looks like. That's not what worries me." He studied me. "You think it'll bleed into your file?" "I don't know. Here's the reality. In the Army, if you're actively receiving behavioral health support and still rated capable, it's not a career killer. But perception matters. Not officially. Unofficially. I've worked too hard to have my competence reduced to dinner commentary." Marcus crossed his arms. "You can't litigate that at a family table." "I'm not trying to." "So what are you trying to do?" I didn't answer immediately. That's when I realized something uncomfortable. I was still trying to make her understand. Even after everything I wanted Valerie to say, I was wrong. Not because I needed validation. Because I needed correction. I didn't get it. Instead, she posted a photo from that dinner on Instagram the next day. Smiling faces. Wine glasses raised. Caption, "Family time is the best therapy." Therapy. The comments rolled in. Heart emojis. Clapping hands. So true. I stared at it longer than I should have. Then I closed the app. That night I reviewed my promotion board notification again. Selected for Lieutenant Colonel. Sequence number pending. Years of evaluations. 3 deployments. PME complete. Solid senior rater comments. None of that came from being dramatic. Valerie doesn't see the file. She sees the flinch. The following week, Mom called again. "She feels like you're shutting her out." "I am. That's extreme." "So was questioning my leadership in front of strangers." "She didn't mean to undermine you." "She did." Silence on the line. Mom lowered her voice. "You've changed." "Yes, Another long pause. You used to let things roll off. That's the point. I used to. When I was younger, I absorbed it. The jokes, the eye rolls, the subtle comparisons. Valerie's toughness was always the standard. If she handled stress without blinking, that meant everyone else should too. But the Army taught me something different. Leadership isn't pretending you're unaffected. It's acknowledging reality and functioning anyway. And reality is, this minimizing trauma doesn't erase it. It just isolates the person carrying it. A few days later, I got an email from a retired colonel who mentors field-grade officers in my branch. He congratulated me on my selection and offered to review my file before pin-on. Professional courtesy. Reading that message, I felt grounded again. In my world, credibility comes from performance under pressure, from documented outcomes, from soldiers who would follow you again, not from how relaxed you look at a backyard barbecue. Valerie's comments didn't change my record, but they clarified something. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a value difference. She believes strength means appearing untouched. I know strength means continuing anyway. By the end of that week, I made a decision I'd never made before. I stopped responding, not as punishment, as boundary. No long explanation, no dramatic announcement, just silence. And for the first time, I wasn't trying to correct her version of me. I was protecting my own. I muted Valerie's contact instead of blocking it. Blocking felt reactive. Muting felt controlled. Her texts still came through. I just didn't see them immediately. That small delay changed everything. It gave me space to decide whether I wanted to engage instead of reacting out of habit. Work didn't slow down because my family was loud. Promotion season inside the Army is its own ecosystem. Files go up to a centralized board. Senior officers sit in a room and review years of your career in minutes. Every evaluation, every award, every assignment. You don't get to stand there and explain yourself. Your record speaks. Mine was solid. 3 deployments. Command time. Bronze Star with V device. Professional military education complete. Strong senior raider comments. There was no line on my file that said flinched at fireworks. Still, perception has a way of sneaking into your head. One afternoon, I sat alone in my office after everyone left reviewing my officer record brief. I wasn't looking for gaps. I was looking for reassurance. Did my record reflect instability? No. Did my evaluations mention behavioral issues? No. In fact, one of my raters had written, demonstrates exceptional composure and clarity under direct threat. I let that line sit for a second. Composure doesn't mean you don't feel anything. It means you manage what you feel. Valerie doesn't understand that difference. She thinks strength is the absence of reaction. The Army taught me strength is reaction under control. Marcus stopped by my office later that week. He had come on post to finalize some paperwork related to his retirement benefits. You look like you're auditing your own life, he said, nodding toward the stack of documents on my desk. Promotion board. He gave a low whistle. Big league. Selection list came out. I'm on it. Sequence number pending. He grinned. Lieutenant Colonel Whitmore. That's got a ring to it. I shrugged. Nothing's official until it's pinned. He leaned against the wall. What's bothering you? I hesitated. My sister's comments are stuck in my head. He didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss it. She questioned whether I should be in command, in front of people. And now part of me wonders if that perception matters more than it should. Marcus shook his head. CAS boards don't care about backyard conversations. I know. You know, but you're still thinking about it. He wasn't wrong. When you lead soldiers, doubt is dangerous. Not external doubt. Internal doubt. Valerie's voice had slipped into my head where it didn't belong. She doesn't get to define your competence, Marcus said quietly. I'm not letting her. You're thinking about it. That one landed. He pointed at my ORB. That document defines you professionally, not her. The thing about boundaries is they feel selfish at first. I'd spent years answering family calls immediately, showing up for holidays even when I was exhausted, laughing off comments because keeping peace felt easier than correcting them. This time I chose something different. I didn't respond to Valerie's messages about me being dramatic. I didn't answer Mom's suggestion that I was too sensitive lately. I didn't defend myself. I redirected my energy. I added extra PT sessions to my week, not because I needed punishment, because physical exertion keeps my brain steady. I doubled down on mentoring my junior officers. If anyone was going to question my leadership, it wouldn't be because my soldiers lacked clarity. At a training exercise 2 weeks later, one of my captains pulled me aside. "Ma'am, the way you handled that convoy rehearsal's solid. Appreciate it. You have a way of staying calm when everyone else starts spiraling." I almost laughed at the word, spiraling. "Experience," I said. He nodded. "Whatever it is, it works." That moment mattered more than Valerie's entire dinner commentary. Competence isn't measured in living rooms. It's measured in outcomes. That night my phone buzzed again. "Valerie, are you seriously not talking to me over a joke?" I read it once and set the phone down. Another message followed. "You're acting like I attacked you." A third. "I was just being honest." Honest. Honesty without empathy is just aggression with better branding. I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, Mom called. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was softer. "She feels like you're cutting her off." That's the first accurate thing anyone had said. I was cutting her off. Not permanently. Not dramatically. Just removing access. When you're in uniform, you accept certain risks. Physical, professional, emotional. Family should not be one of them. The next morning, I received official notification of my projected pin-on window. A date range. A ceremony to plan. I stared at the email longer than necessary. Lieutenant Colonel. I thought about Valerie's voice at the table. If loud noises still mess you up, how are you leading soldiers? By doing the job. By showing up. By acknowledging what happened instead of pretending it didn't. I didn't text her the news. Not out of spite. Because for once, I didn't feel the urge to prove anything. That shift was subtle, but it was real. For years, I'd tried to translate my experience into language my family could accept. Simplify it. Soften it. Make it palatable. Now I wasn't translating. I was operating. And whether Valerie understood that or not stopped feeling urgent. Boundaries aren't loud. They're consistent. And consistency is something I've practiced for a long time. I was reviewing a range safety packet when my office line rang with an unfamiliar extension. Lieutenant Colonel Select Whitmore Y answered. A woman introduced herself as a civilian public affairs officer assigned to our division. Her tone was calm procedural. "We're coordinating with PBS on a documentary series focused on women in combat leadership roles," she said. "Your name was recommended." I leaned back in my chair. "Recommended by who?" "Your brigade commander, ma'am." Specifically regarding the 2021 Syria route clearance incident. That got my attention. "The Bronze Star action?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am. There's helmet camera footage that was cleared during the awards review process. We've verified it's releasable. PBS would like to request your consent to use a portion of it." I stared at the wall in front of my desk for a second. The footage. I hadn't seen it. I knew it existed. After the incident, it went through the standard review channels for documentation and the Valor recommendation. I signed off on the after-action report. That was enough for me. "We would not release anything that compromises tactics, techniques, or procedures," she added. "OPSEC review is complete." Of course it was. Public affairs doesn't freelance. "What exactly are they focusing on?" I asked. "Leadership under fire. Decision-making. Representation. They want to show real operational footage, not reenactments. Real footage. That's what people say when they want authenticity without understanding cost." "When would it air?" I asked. "Projected timeline is 3 months out. We'd schedule an interview beforehand. 3 months. I glanced at the calendar on my screen. My projected pin-on window was inside that range. This wasn't about publicity. It wasn't even about me. It was about a day that had already been filed, archived, documented, and lived through. "Can I review the segment before it airs?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am. You'll have an opportunity to view the edited portion for accuracy." Accuracy. I almost smiled at that. The footage would show the blast, the smoke, the movement back into the vehicle. It would show my body doing what it was trained to do. It would not show the phone call to Rodriguez's parents. It would not show the nights after. "Send me the paperwork," I said. "Of course, ma'am." When the call ended, I stayed still for a moment. Marcus texted me later that afternoon about grabbing coffee off post. I told him yes. We met at a small place near downtown Colorado Springs. He noticed I was quieter than usual. "What happened?" he asked. "Public Affairs wants to use the Syria footage for a documentary." He didn't look surprised. "Makes sense." "I don't need it." "Probably not. I don't want to relive it either." He took a slow sip of his coffee. "You don't get to decide which parts of your career exist." "That's not what I mean." He leaned forward. "What are you worried about?" I considered the answer. "I don't want to be reduced to that one moment." He nodded. "You won't be. You don't know that." "I know you," he said. That footage shows what you did, not who you are entirely. That's the problem. People fill in the rest. He shrugged. They already do. He wasn't wrong. Valerie had filled in the rest without ever asking about the day itself. You thinking of telling your family? Marcus asked. No. He raised an eyebrow. They didn't ask before I said. I'm not offering now. He gave a small nod. Fair. That night I opened the email from Public Affairs. Consent forms. Release language. Interview scheduling options. Everything was structured. Transparent. No surprises. I signed electronically. A week later, I sat in a conference room on post with a producer and a small camera crew. No dramatic lighting, no swelling music, just a couple of chairs and neutral walls. The producer asked direct questions. What was going through your mind when you re-entered the vehicle? Risk assessment, I answered. Probability of secondary device versus survivability of the soldier still inside. She blinked, maybe expecting something more emotional. And fear. Fear is constant in those environments. It doesn't change the math. We kept it factual, tactical, clear. They showed me a short preview of the footage they intended to use. The blast, the smoke, my movement back toward the MRAP. Watching yourself in combat is strange. I wasn't heroic in the clip. I wasn't dramatic. I looked focused, efficient, controlled. No panic, no drama. The segment narrator's draft line read, Major Cassandra Whitmore re-entered a blast area under active threat to extract a wounded soldier. Accurate. I approved it. Driving home that evening, I felt neutral. Not excited, not anxious, just aware. The documentary would air whether my sister ever understood my experience or not. It would exist independently of her opinion. That felt different. A few days later, Mom texted, Are you coming home for Thanksgiving? Short, casual. I stared at the message. 3 months ago, I would have responded immediately. Now I waited. Not out of pettiness, out of choice. I typed back, undecided. Valerie's name lit up on my phone later that night. I heard from Mom. You're not coming. I didn't answer. Another message. You're really dragging this out. Dragging. I thought about the footage sitting in a PBS editing suite somewhere. About the day that would eventually air on national television. About the fact that Valerie still hadn't asked what actually happened. She just wanted the tension resolved. Resolution without understanding. That's her style. The air date email came 2 weeks later, Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern. I added it to my calendar without comment. And for the first time since that dinner in Dallas, I felt something settle into place that had nothing to do with proving anything to anyone. It was just truth. Documented. Cleared. Ready. I locked my apartment door 5 minutes before 8 and set my phone face down on the counter. No dramatic setup. No guests. Just me, a glass of water, and a quiet living room in Colorado Springs. The PBS intro music started right on time. Calm, serious public broadcasting energy. The kind of tone that makes everything feel official without trying too hard. The episode was titled Women Under Fire. They opened with interviews from different branches. Infantry, aviation, logistics. Stories about leadership, about decisions made in seconds that carry weight for years. My segment was third. I didn't brace myself. I didn't hold my breath. The screen cut to Syria. Pale sky, dust, convoy staged, helmet cam angle. I hadn't watched the raw footage before. Seeing it from that perspective felt detached, like watching someone else's day at work. The blast hit. The audio cracked through my living room speakers. Even knowing it was coming, my shoulders tightened automatically. The camera jerked with the shockwave. Voices overlapped. Someone yelling, "Contact left." Then the part where I moved. From the camera's angle, I looked smaller than I remembered. Just another uniform moving toward smoke. The narrator's voice layered over it. Major Cassandra Whitmore re-entered a blast zone under active threat to extract a wounded soldier from a burning vehicle. The clip showed me pulling Turner out, bracing against the MRAP frame. It cut before the medic work, before Rodriguez. Just the action. No music swelling, no slow motion. Just fact. They transitioned to my interview clip. What was going through your mind, the producer had asked. Risk assessment, I answered on screen. Probability versus survivability. My voice sounded steady, clinical. They cut to a retired general commenting on leadership under fire. Then to a statistic about women in combat leadership roles. And then it moved on. That was it. 8 minutes of national television. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt exposed in a controlled way. My phone buzzed on the counter. I ignored it until the credits rolled. When I picked it up, there were 3 texts. One from Marcus. Accurate. Proud of you. One from a captain in my battalion. Ma'am just saw PBS. Solid representation. And one from an unfamiliar Dallas number. Is that your sister on PBS? I stared at that one longer. It wasn't Valerie. It was someone else watching. My phone rang seconds later. Mom. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I answered. Her voice was different. Not panicked, not defensive. I just watched it. Okay. There was a pause. I didn't know it was like that. The sentence landed softer than I expected. You didn't ask, I said. Silence. I guess I didn't, she admitted. In the background, I could hear a television still playing. Probably replaying the segment. Valerie saw it too, Mom added. I didn't respond. She's quiet. That word hung there. Quiet. Valerie doesn't do quiet. Cass' mom said carefully that was serious. Yes. That was real. Yes. Another pause. I'm sorry if we made light of it. If. The conditional apology. I have to go, I said. She didn't argue. 10 minutes later, Valerie's name lit up on my screen. I considered letting it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered. She didn't start with hello. I didn't know it was like that. Same sentence. Different tone. It was, I said. A long exhale on her end. You went back in. Yes. You could have died. Yes. Silence again. For once, she didn't fill it. I didn't know, she repeated. You didn't ask. There it was again. That's what this has been about the whole time. Not disagreement. Absence of curiosity. She cleared her throat. Why didn't you tell me? I leaned back against the couch. Would it have changed anything? She didn't answer, because the honest answer was no. If I'd described the blast in detail months ago, she would have listened politely. Then circled back to fireworks and therapy. Proof isn't persuasion. It's confirmation. People are texting me, she said suddenly. Okay. They're sending the clip. Okay. I look like an idiot. There it was. Not grief, not guilt. Optics. You look uninformed, I corrected. She didn't argue. I didn't mean to undermine you, she said. You did. Another silence. On the other end of the line, I could hear movement. Maybe pacing. I thought you were exaggerating, she admitted finally. About what? About how bad it was. I let that sit. You thought I was being dramatic, I said. Her breath hitched slightly. I guess I did. The honesty was new. I've led soldiers in combat for over a decade, I said evenly. I don't exaggerate. I know that now. Do you? That question stayed in my head, but I didn't voice it. I need to think, she added. Okay. No yelling. No theatrics. Just recalibration. When the call ended, I sat in the same spot for a while. The apartment felt the same. The walls didn't move. The metal in its case on my bookshelf didn't glow brighter. Nothing about my life changed tonight. Except this. The version of me Valerie had built in her head didn't survive 8 minutes of footage. And for the first time since that dinner table, I didn't feel the urge to defend myself. The truth had done that without me. Valerie showed up in Colorado 2 weeks later with a rental car and no warning beyond a text that said I'm in town. I considered not responding. Instead, I sent my address. She knocked once, not aggressively, not timidly, just once. When I opened the door, she looked smaller than she had in Dallas. Same polished hair, same tailored jacket, but her posture was tighter. You're busy, she asked. I can spare an hour. She stepped inside and glanced around my apartment. Neat, minimal, functional, no decorative chaos. This is simple, she said. It works. She nodded like that made sense. We sat across from each other at my small kitchen table. No wine, no audience. For a moment, she just studied me. I watched it again, she said finally. Okay. I didn't realize how fast it all happened. That's the point. She rubbed her hands together. When you flinched at fireworks, I thought you were stuck in it. I am stuck in it, I said. That's how memory works. She swallowed. But you were calm. In the footage. Yes, you didn't look scared. I was. That seemed to surprise her. You didn't show it. That's leadership. She leaned back, absorbing that. I think I misunderstood what strength looks like, she admitted. That's part of it. Part black. I didn't soften it. You questioned whether I should be in command, I said. In front of people who don't know anything about my job. Her jaw tightened. I didn't mean it like that. But you said it. She didn't argue. You made my trauma a punchline, I continued. Not once. Repeatedly. Her eyes dropped to the table. I thought if you kept talking about it, you'd never move past it, she said quietly. I don't talk about it, I replied. You bring it up. That landed harder than anything else. She inhaled slowly. I was embarrassed. By what? By how visible it was. There it was. Not fear for me. Not doubt about my competence. Embarrassment. You crouched at my party, she said. People looked at you. Yes, and I didn't know how to explain it. You could have tried asking. Silence filled the room. Not hostile, just heavy. I've built my whole career on being steady, she said. Clients trust me because I don't crack. And seeing you react like that made me uncomfortable. That's about you, I said. She nodded once. I know. We sat there for a few seconds without speaking. You think I'm weak, I asked. She looked up immediately. No. You did. She hesitated. I thought, maybe you were holding on to it. I'm managing it, I corrected. There's a difference. She exhaled sharply, almost like she was deflating. I didn't realize how much I minimized it, she said. I kept comparing it to my own stress. It's not comparable. I see that now. I studied her face. For once there was no smirk. No half laugh. Just discomfort. Do you know why I stopped responding, I asked. She shook her head. Because every time I explained myself, you reduced it. Her shoulders slumped slightly. I didn't think you needed defending, she said. You've always been the strong one. That's not the same as invincible. Another pause. You embarrassed me, I said plainly. I know. Not because you disagreed. Because you made it public. She nodded again. I won't do that again, she said. That's not enough. She looked confused. You don't just stop joking about it, I said. You change how you think about it. She was quiet for a long time. That's going to take work, she admitted. Then do it. No sarcasm, no edge. Just instruction. I was wrong, she said finally. I thought you were exaggerating. I thought you were leaning into it. I wasn't. I see that. I didn't rush to reassure her. I didn't tell her it was fine, because it wasn't. Why didn't you tell us more? She asked after a moment. Because every time I tried, you pivoted. She winced slightly. That's fair. You don't get to decide what's dramatic about something you've never experienced. I understand that now. Do you? I didn't say it out loud. She leaned forward slightly. I'm proud of you. That's not what this is about. I know. But I am. Pride without understanding used to feel hollow. Now it just felt incomplete. You don't owe me forgiveness, she added. That's correct. She almost smiled at that. What do you need from me? She asked. Respect, I said immediately. Not applause. Not social media posts. Respect. She nodded slowly. And if I mess up, she asked, then I'll disengage again. No threat in it. Just clarity. She accepted that. We talked for another 20 minutes. Not about Syria. Not about fireworks. About boundaries. About how she fills silence with jokes. About how I fill conflict with distance. Neither of us blamed Mom. Neither of us pretended childhood wasn't part of it. When she stood to leave, she paused near the door. I didn't know, she said again. I know. That's different from forgiving. As she walked down the stairs toward the parking lot, I didn't feel victorious. I felt stable. The power shift wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was subtle. She wasn't laughing anymore, and I wasn't explaining anymore. I adjusted the new silver oak leaf on my collar and checked the alignment in the mirror one last time. The ceremony was small, intentional. Fort Carson doesn't do dramatic unless it's a change of command. This was a promotion, not a parade. A handful of officers from my brigade stood near the front. A few captains I'd mentored. Marcus had flown in and was leaning casually against the back wall, arms crossed, looking like he'd rather be anywhere but a formal event. He hates dress uniforms. Mom and Valerie sat in the second row. No big hats, no over-the-top outfits, just quiet. When my brigade commander called my name, I stepped forward. He read the official order promoting me to Lieutenant Colonel, United States Army. Effective date, authority line, standard language. There's something grounding about hearing your career summarized in regulation tone. Years reduced to a paragraph. Mom pinned one side of the rank. Marcus pinned the other. Valerie stood slightly behind them, hands clasped, waiting her turn to shake my hand afterward. It wasn't symbolic in some dramatic way. It was practical. I'd chosen Mom to participate. Not out of obligation, out of decision. The commander stepped back. Lieutenant Colonel Whitmore has consistently demonstrated composure under pressure and exceptional leadership in combat and garrison environments. Composure. There's that word again. Applause followed. Brief, professional. I didn't cry. I didn't scan the room for approval. I just stood there in uniform and accepted it. After the formalities, people filtered into smaller conversations. Coffee, handshakes, quick congratulations. Valerie approached last. You earned that, she said. Yes, No sarcasm, no edge. She glanced at the oak leaf on my collar. It looks right. It is. We stood there for a moment without forcing small talk. I've been thinking about what you said, she added. About respect. She nodded. I've been asking better questions, she said. To people I know who've deployed. I watched her carefully, and I asked, and I didn't realize how much I filtered everything through what makes me comfortable. That's normal, I said. It's also limiting. She gave a slight nod. I told Mom we don't joke about it anymore, she said. That's a start. She hesitated. I also took down that Instagram post. I almost laughed. Why? Because it was dismissive. It was more than dismissive. But I let it sit. People from church asked me about the documentary, she continued. I didn't know what to say at first. And now, I say my sister did her job and paid a price for it. That was closer. Marcus walked over and interrupted before the conversation could stretch too long. Lieutenant Colonel, he said with exaggerated formality, how does it feel outranking half the room? Unnecessary, I replied. He grinned. Good. Mom joined us, eyes still a little red from earlier. Your father would have been proud, she said quietly. I know. She held my arm for a moment longer than usual. I'm glad you didn't shut us out completely, she added. That depended on behavior. She nodded, accepting that. No guilt, no manipulation, just acknowledgement. Later that afternoon, after everyone cleared out, I stayed behind in the empty conference room for a minute. The silver oak leaf felt heavier than the rank I'd worn before. Not physically, symbolically. Lieutenant Colonel means more responsibility, larger formations, bigger consequences. It doesn't mean fewer memories. It doesn't mean fireworks stop sounding like something else for half a second. It means you carry it and lead anyway. When I stepped outside, Valerie was waiting near the parking lot. You heading back to Dallas tonight, I asked. Tomorrow morning. She shifted slightly. I wanted to say something before I leave. I waited. I'm not embarrassed anymore, she said. Of me, of not understanding. That was honest. I used to think admitting I was wrong made me look weak, she continued. Now I think pretending I wasn't wrong made me look worse. That's growth, I said. She exhaled slowly. I'm trying. I can see that. Not forgiveness. Recognition. She looked at me carefully. You don't need us to validate you anymore, she said. No, that's different. Yes. She nodded like she was cataloging that shift. I'm glad you let me come today, she added. I invited you, I reminded her. She gave a small smile. Yeah, you did. That's the difference. I invited her, not because I needed applause, not because the documentary changed my worth, because I chose to. When she hugged me, it wasn't performative. It wasn't stiff. It was brief and steady. As she walked toward her rental car, I didn't feel like I'd won anything. There was no revenge speech, no dramatic reversal, just correction. The narrative she built about me months ago had collapsed quietly under the weight of facts. The footage didn't create strength. It revealed it. And the promotion didn't validate me. It reflected work already done. That night I hung my new rank jacket in the closet and set the previous one aside. Routine movement. No ceremony at home. My phone buzzed with a message from one of my captains. Ma'am, proud to serve under you. That meant more than anything said at a dinner table. 5 years ago, I would have chased understanding from people who didn't ask questions. Now I lead soldiers who ask better ones. And when I think about that night in Dallas, about the laugh, the word dramatic, the implication that trauma equals weakness, it feels distant. Not erased, just smaller. Because strength isn't the absence of reaction. It's the decision to stand anyway. And I've been standing for a long time. The older I get, the less interested I am in winning arguments. What I wanted back then wasn't revenge. It was recognition. Not applause, not sympathy, just basic respect for what service actually costs. My sister laughed at my trauma because she didn't understand it. My family minimized it because it made them uncomfortable. And for a while, I tried to translate my experience into something easier for them to digest. I don't do that anymore. The footage didn't make me strong. The rank didn't make me worthy. And the documentary didn't rewrite my story. It just exposed what had already been true. Trauma doesn't cancel leadership. PTSD doesn't erase competence. And family doesn't get a free pass to turn your scars into family drama. If you've ever been mocked for something real, you were battling whether it was combat stress, anxiety, grief, or anything else, you're not weak. And you're not dramatic. You're carrying weight most people never had to lift. Setting boundaries isn't revenge. It's protection. And sometimes the most powerful moment in a family revenge story isn't when they're proven wrong, it's when you stop needing them to be right. If this story resonated with you, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I share real military stories, family revenge stories, and hard-earned lessons about respect, resilience, and rebuilding your life on your own terms. And if you've ever had to draw a line with someone who underestimated you, I'd genuinely like to hear about it. You're not the only one who's had to do that.